welcome to Freiburg. The Toyota 1000 Desert Race gets underway from here. Over the next 3 days, competitors will face what is most probably one of the toughest events on the South African motorsport calendar. Ahead of them lies the unyielding Kalahari Desert, and they have to negotiate 1,000 kilometers. And if they'd like to be there at the end of the National Championship log, they'll have to do well in this one particularly. More than 100 intrepid off-roaders converged on Freiburg, and the opening race section consisted of a 70-kilometer loop starting and finishing in Freiburg. This would determine start positions on day 2. Pre-race favourites were Philip Milan and Richard Leek in the Toyota Hilux.
Vandag is dit 'n baie belangrike situasie om om die vinnigste tyd op te sit dat ons môre eers kan wegtrek. Maar met die kaland Hannes Grobler en sy massiewe monster wat hier is dit miskien ver gesocht om te dink ons sal dit reg kry. Maar ons gaan beslis probeer want môre sal dit vir ons 'n baie groot voorsprong gee as ons uit die stof uit kan bly.
The Toyota pair faced stiff competition from the likes of previous winners Hannes Grobler and Piet Swanepoel in the Nissan Skyline rally car.
Ons is op die oomblik besig om 'n voertuig voor te berei vir veldrenne. Hy was ongelukkig nie betyds klaar nie en omdat ons hierdie veldren so baie geniet hier rond, het ons besluit ons moet kom jaag en al ding wat ons toe kon kry is die ou tydrenmotor wat ons in 1986 die kampioenskap ook mee gewen het. En toe die manne ingespring en ons is hierso.
Brothers Klaas and Gant Degener in the Duckham's Chenoweth were confident of a good result.
I think the main competition must be Philip Milan and Richard Leek in the turbocharged Toyota Hilux. Kasi Kutsia, if they don't have any problems, will definitely be a challenge. And of course, Hannes is there in his rally car. The Audi Quattro has won it before. It's not that rough a race that a rally car can't do well. So I would say those three are my main sort of competition.
The first racing section produced a few problems for some of the more fancied competitors like Milan and Leek in the Toyota, who had to be content with the 4th fastest time. The Stellarland trial determines grid positions for the start of the race proper, and there is always a scramble for the top positions. The first major casualties were the Degener brothers. Only 20 kilometers into the race, they blew the Chenoweth's engine and were forced to hitch a ride back to the main road.
Bang, yeah. We were about 5,500. It wasn't actually that much. Coming into a turn in a mini field. And it just said bang and that was it.
That's you out of the race for the whole lot?
Unfortunately, yeah. We can't change motors, so that's it.
There were also problems for former national rally and off-road champions Grobler and Swanepoel. Grass clogged up the Skyline's fuel system and it cost the pair 40 minutes, putting the Springboks well down the list. They eventually dropped out altogether on the final day. Veteran Jack Spencer and Steve Vermaak in the Duckham's Sandmaster set fastest time of the day to snatch pole position after Milan and Leek in the Toyota Hilux also ran into problems. Second fastest time went to Robin Yates and Wildman Bales in the Permistic Race Go, with rally stars Kasi Kutsia and Wiley Harrington third fastest in the BP Nissan. Fastest qualifier Jack Spencer was in a confident mood.
Happy, we must just try and keep on the route, and in that respect I've got Steve Vermaak to look after me. Should be right.
At the end of the first section, the top 10 positions on the start grid saw an even split between the bakkies and the single and twin-seater space frame vehicles. Die motorfietsafdeling en kenners het 'n tydstryd tussen 4-jaars voorspel. Jeremy Davies op die Dryruns Kawasaki het vir sy derde agtereenvolgende oorwinning in die ren gemik en hy was die gunsteling om die bruiswyn te spuit.
I'm going to give it a good go this year. There's a lot of competition and I think it's going to be a dice between me, Elfie and Willie Island right to the end. But I'm going to go for a good time today and try right from the front and set the pace. It's difficult because you have to do a lot of navigating and get lost. You run against the traffic and that, but I'll give it a good bet.
Davies sou egter taai mededinging hê van Greenup KTM se Willie Island.
It's always nice to start off in front, but I like to just start maybe second or third always. Let somebody else lead the pack because somebody always goes wrong, you know, and you always got that pressure behind you if you're in front. So if I just come in the first 3, that's fine.
Die driemalige kampioen Hilton Beatty, ook op 'n Greenup KTM, sowel as Alfie Cox op sy NGK Kawasaki, sou ook vir Davies onder druk plaas.
You know, this is a hell of a race, eh? 1,000 kilometers of sometimes the worst conditions that you could ever come across. Toyota 1000 is known as the desert race of all desert races.
Die vinnigste motorfietskombinasie in die eerste renskom was Hilton Beatty en sy Greenup KTM. Hy was amper 'n minuut voor Davies met Island derde en Patrick Andrews vierde. Gavin Nimmo was volgende op Winston Yamaha met die 50-jarige Joe van Altena, die oudste jaar in die byeenkoms 6de op 'n 200cc Kawasaki. Die fikse van Altena was vol selfvertroue en gereed om 'n jongerjaars 'n ding of twee te wys.
When they look over their shoulder, if they see me biting on the front of my helmet, boy, they know I don't give in.
Race well.
And in '87, I won the roof in the 200 class. I'm ready for them. Anytime, anywhere, you tell those youngsters, JVA is ready.
Nou ja, die uitslae vir die motorfietsafdeling toon dat die Kawasaki span 4 plekke verower het in die top 10 teenoor die 3 elk van KTM en Yamaha. The Kalahari 1000 Desert Race has certainly lived up to its reputation once again. They start off with a stellar land trial which predetermines grid positions on the start of the second day. A cold Northern Cape day dawned, but things were destined to hot up for the races. The route for the second day saw competitors head for the refuel at Linnepen and then set sail for Taylor's Pan on the Botswana border via Heninvlei Pan. Malan and Leek in the Toyota Hilux lost little time in forging their way to the front on day 2. They stormed ahead of the crews in front of them, and at the refuel, they had opened up a sizable lead. At Taylor's Pan, they were 11 minutes ahead of Kunneke and Dreyer in the Nissan, who won this event 2 years ago. Kunneke and Dreyer moved ahead of Kasi Kutsia and Wiley Harrington in another safari, with a third safari fourth in the hands of Linton Draper and Peter Smith. Yates and Bales were leading Class 8 with Richard Carolyn in front in Class 9 in Brother Bucks Carolyn's lubrication equipment race car, while Dave and Greg Gurney were having a good run to lead Class 4 in an Isuzu. The top 10 at the end of racing section 2 saw the Buckies starting to dominate. There were 6 Buckies in the top 10, maintaining a Toyota 1000 tradition. Die opwindendste konfrontasie vir die dag was ongetwyfeld die tussen Willie Island en Jeremy Davies. Die 2 jaars het die hele pad geveg en die ruwe terrein gereeld langs mekaar aangepak teen snelhede van tot 170 km/h. Alfie Cox het ook goed gevaar om die voorste jaars in sig te hou en by die oornaghalte was hy net 90 sekondes agter hulle. Die aanvanklike voorloper Hilton Beatty was 4de ondanks 'n beenbesering wat hom mettertyd sou dwing om te onttrek. Davies was voor in die 500cc klas, Island in die 250cc klas en Van Altena in die 200cc klas. Die veteraan van Altena moes egter ook te hulp gooi nadat hy verskeie ribbes in 'n valslag gebreek het. Aan die einde van die tweede dag was Kawasaki in 'n sterk posisie met 4 fietsse in die voorste 10 plekke. Alle oë was egter op Davies en Island gerig. At Taylor's Pan, crews took a well-earned rest. The bright fires were started. There was plenty of opportunity to discuss the day's racing, and it all adds up to the special appeal of the Toyota 1000. Early the next morning, it was back to serious racing, with Malan and Leek in the Toyota Hilux leading the field away on the final leg of what was turning into a real cliffhanger. The final section saw crews backtrack along the previous day's route. The warm welcome waiting back at Freiburg Motor Club was something to look forward to. Kunneke and Dreyer quickly put the pressure on Malan and Leek, and at the refuel had made up 10 minutes. The Toyota had developed gearbox problems, and Malan and Leek lost four-wheel drive. Kunneke and Dreyer moved into the lead, but were to run into problems of their own. They first hit a cow, and then managed to take a wrong turn. It cost them valuable time, and gave Malan and Leek some breathing space when they moved back into the lead. Yates and Bales were going well in third spot in the Permistic race car, and still headed Class 8 ahead of Spencer and Vermaak in the Duckham Sandmaster. Further down the field, Bill Angus and Derek Weatherall were leading Class 3 in their battered Toyota Hilux after a high-speed encounter with a tree, and Alfred van Vuren and Piet Pelser were in the lead in Class 5 in another Toyota Hilux. Richard Carolyn was also going well in Class 9, as were the Petersen brothers at the head of the Class 10 field. For Kutsia and Harrington, however, it was the end of the road shortly after the refuel when they retired with mechanical problems. For Malan, it was his first Toyota 1000 Desert Race win, with Leek scoring his second success. Julle het 'n bietjie van 'n probleem gehad, vertel ons daarvan.
Dit was basies die radkas, het baie seer gekry en ons moes hom met per hand inhou die hele pad en hy Maar in die eind het ons maar net besluit, nou moet ons maar gaan. Ek kan nie langer wag.
Die manne het julle ingehaal ook op 'n stadium daar. Daar was net 'n minuut verskil op een stadium.
Ja, wel ons het maar net die kar probeer spaar en toe besluit ons dat dit spaar help nou nie meer nie. Hoe nou maar betaal maar en toe ry ons.
Springbok navigator Leek boasted battle scars with blisters, the result of holding the gear lever in place over the final 200 kilometers. Kunneke and Andrea charged home to a well-earned second place after a race-long tussle with Milan and Leek.
Ons was so omtrent vir 150 km voor Philip en net voor ons die pafwiel gekry het, sy by ons verby en ons was in sy stof, ons moes seker 'n klip of iets raak gery het.
The popular Robin Yates and Wildman Bales drove consistently to finish third overall and also had the distinction of being the first twin-seater crew across the line. Class 3 victors Bill Angus and Derek Weatherall found the going a little tough in their Toyota Hilux.
For the refuel point, from the way back, and we were on a high-speed section, about 140 kilometers an hour, and the car jumped out the track and went sideways into a big tree. And we obviously very grateful for that we actually got out safely, because we would have rolled many times if it wasn't for the tree. However, we're all safe and sound and back home. That's all that counts.
The event produced a dream result for Toyota, who not only clinched overall victory but also took the honours in 3 classes and in the prestigious Manufacturers Team Award. Die motorfietsjaars kon minstens 2 ure langer as die 4-wielbrigade slaap en kenners het 'n taaistryd tussen Davies, Island, Cox en BT verwag. Dit het egter gelyk asof die geluk nie aan BT se kant was nie.
It's just in this first section in the tight stuff I've got to put my leg down. I'm scared of twisting it again, you know. So I just have to take it easy on this first section. On the flat out stuff it's alright. I don't have to worry about touching or whatever. I can just keep my feet on the pegs.
Die beseerde BT moes mettertyd onttrek. Voor hom het die stryd tussen Island, Davies en Cox egter onverpoost voortgeduur. Island op die Green KTM was eerste by die Linop en hervolpunt, meer as 'n minuut voor Davies met Cox op die NGK Kawasaki ook steeds in die prentjie in die 3de plek.
Hey, Coxon!
Na van Alton se onttrekking was Ralph Pitchford ook op 'n Kawasaki voor in die 200cc klas. Hy is gevolg deur John Hodgson op die KTM en Jason Andriaika wat albei bestendig gejaag het. Die uiters fikse Davies het in die laaste 200 km van die roete daarin geslaag om onder Cox en Island uit te suil deur die groter krag van sy 500cc fiets doeltreffend in te span. Hy was by die eindpunt 6 minute voor sy Kawasaki spanmaat. Vir 'n tevrede Cox was dit die tweede agtereenvolgende jaar wat hy tweede geëindig het in die taaie wedren.
Well, he set off with a quick pace this morning, so I just had a hold there. I knew after about 100 odd Ks that it got quicker, and I got the legs on him there, so if I could stay with him to there, I could pull him on the quick stuff. So when I got to the 4th stop and he wasn't there, I knew I could hold it home, so it's nice to be in.
'n moe Willie Island op sy Green KTM wat dwars deur die ren deur 'n griepaanval getuister is, moes met 3de plek tevrede wees.
I can't even speak. I've been riding it through the whole day. I couldn't even see anymore.
Met oorwinnings in al 3 die klasse was Toyota se woestynren 'n sege vir Kawasaki. Ook Davies was meer as gelukkig met sy 3de agtereenvolgende oorwinning in 'n ren wat ook in 1985 deur sy broer Mark ingepalm is. But when all
was a hot and windy day at Southwell, just outside of Grahamstown, when 59 crazy drivers and their co-drivers got into their mean machines to start the 5th PG Windscreen Settler 500 off-road race. This was also the first time that this race was part of the national circuit. The track, if you can call it that, must be the worst in the country. To normal people, this must sound strange, but to these drivers, it's actually something they look forward to. Off they were on the 62-kilometer course in their Buckies, Beetles, Sandmasters, Spiders and other strange-looking vehicles. No motorbikes were entered, as it was too dangerous, seeing that the second day's race consisted of 3 laps. To make it a bit more competitive for the entrants, the vehicles are grouped into 9 different classes. The classes are determined by frame design, also limiting factors such as the suspension, engine capacity, Weber's per cylinder, carburation, turbocharger and a supercharge. All this is determined and specified by SA Motorsport Control. Klaus Degener came charging down this hill as if he left his paycheck down there. Followed very closely by Robin Yates, while a couple of windswept spectators looked on. You take the low road and I'll take the high road and I'll be there before you. Oh well, maybe next time, just as soon as I find out where we are going, after all. Must be what Philip Fullion was telling Jack Spencer, which he also did, seeing that he finished 4 places ahead of Jack. Stratford Focht tried his best to hurt the suspension of this Toyota, but to no avail. And with that breakneck speed, he worked himself into 13th position for the start of day 2. Some guys thought that pushing their cars could get them to the finish line a little bit sooner. But were they going the right way? Even after Robert Walk showed him which road to take, he still persisted in trying to go backwards. Some people just never learn. This guy was trying everything to outrun Gerard Bruce, who in turn was being chased by Vernon Axon. Gerard actually finished 17 positions ahead of Vernon. Sideways, Selwyn Robinson gave it everything he had, and sometimes even more, while his sidekick Donald Duck, or should I rather say Don Broadhurst, was doing a breakdance, holding on and showing the route out to Selwyn all at the same time. From the Sony in-car camera, we actually see the driver fighting the long brown monster in front of him. At this speed, it's hard to believe that they never even touched a gatepost. Well done, I say. Obviously, this combination worked well for them, for the next day, they started off 8th on the grid. This poor fellow nearly went into the ditch, but fortunately, braked in the nick of time. Arno van der Westhuizen was definitely pursued by something very, very big, because the chopper pilot, Ken Whittle, had to open up all the throttles to keep up with him. He went straight into the ditch, but luckily his channel climbed on the other side just as easily and proceeded as if nothing had happened. Excuse me, sir, please give way to the oncoming traffic on the left. Was he being so kind, or was it possibly because of this guy with the camera? Harry Roscoe held the prime position on the grid for the start of the second day, with Linton Draper and Richard Schilling in second and third, and Klaus Degener fourth, followed by Robin Yates. At sunrise, we asked Harry Roscoe how he felt about the big guns behind him.
It's frightening. But I think their cars are more capable of going through the rough stuff for longer periods than I went yesterday. I mean, there's no ways I can drive my car as fast as I did yesterday for the period I think expected of today. So I think they got a better chance because their cars are far superior to mine.
Richard Schilling also commented on his chances of winning the race at that stage.
Good. Take it easy to start off with. Do one lap, refuel. Have learned where the course is, where the opportunities are, and then keep on going consistently and hopefully end up in front.
Big Bix Carolyn off on his way on the beginning of day 2 on the Settlers 500. Richard Schilling's meaning of slow means something rather different to the normal use of the word. And so he had to pay the price by losing a couple of minutes or two to change a front wheel. Glenn Parker also had a minor problem here, but was soon back on the road. Unfortunately, he never finished the race because while helping a fellow contestant, his own car ran over him and injured his legs. Glenn was the only contestant in Class 7, and therefore Class 7 had no overall winner. Who said cows can only be caught by them cowboys on horseback? This is just a horse of a different colour. Robin Yates races behind the calf, which was later roped down by traffic wardens for speeding. How the suspension of these cars last on these roads for 3 laps of 146 kilometers each, only the manufacturers will know. This competitor left a checkpoint like a bullet out of a barrel, leaving a dusty trail in the early morning and the dry East Cape countryside. Again, the suspension of the Raceco Kajima of Bix Carolyn was doing more than its fair share of work. Maybe that's why he needs a sponsor. With the sun still low over the mountains in the Eastern Cape, 2 of the competitors tried to hide in the shady part of the mountain. It wasn't long before the sun spotted their dusty trail and followed them down here, spraying its scorching rays on the whole track so that later there was no place to hide. Grant Ranger tried to get too much out of his car, and he, like so many others, paid the penalty and had to retire after only 2 hours and 57 minutes. But many of the competitors were merely on a road to nowhere. Eugene Potgieter and T. Ranger didn't look too happy with this rocky downhill slide and had to hold on for dear life. Yet, still had a little bit of time to speak to some of the spectators. Carefully maneuvering down the treacherous decline in their green Mamba, El Chandler also couldn't make it to the finish. So, trying to go where you want to go isn't always as easy as you find it, and adds some more meaning to those musical words, slip sliding away. Battered, Chris Kunneke tried to sell his bakkie off piece by piece. But I don't think there were any buyers at that stage. Even the Panda had lost its smile at this stage of the race. They came down the decline, which was quickly baptized as Bandit Hill. This monstrous, uneven, rugged piece of East Cape terrain in fact stole the chances of many of the competitors of winning their classes, let alone finishing the race. Harry Roscoe was right when he said he couldn't go that fast for that long, because just after he went down here, he lost both his front wheels and had to call it a day. Some guys have suspensions on their cars, and other guys have suspensions. Philip Milan and Richard Leake had to quit, as did Selwyn Robinson. Didn't see that road sign when I went for my license a couple of years ago. Looks like Chris Kunneke eventually found a buyer for that back part of his vehicle. The 2 days of near bundu bashing, rugged terrain, searing heat and aching muscles were all worth the effort for these two. Bucks Carolyn and Mike Pretorius came through yet again in fine style for a deserved win in both class and overall position. Seeing as though most of the champagne went to waste all over their bodies, they decided to have a beer, or two, or three.
We started off 7th this morning, and we had a few problems. We threw a fan belt, and it knocked off the dizzy cap, and we had no real major problems. We had to get out the car, spark plug lead came off, and all the guys gave us a hard time. I think the worst guy was Glenn Parker and RP Kunneke. We've been with him the whole day. I'm surprised I think he's got a little bit of a problem, but we're expecting him any minute now. And it was a good race. I enjoyed it.
23 minutes behind in second position, Stratford Frucht, with Richard Schilling retaining his third position. Assistant Clerk of the course, Marie Primmick, with a few positive words.
The PG Windscreen Settler 500 is a very great event in the Eastern Cape. We've put the settler country on the map. We've been fighting very hard to get national championship status, to get recognition for the Eastern Cape. We work very hard with the local environmental people. The farmers give us tremendous support, and we're very, very proud of having the race. It's the 5th one on the national calendar. So for the competitors, it's very important to score well today. It was very rough. The other races were more truck orientated, where this is space frame, but some you win and some you lose. We're very happy about the total outcome of the event, and the feedback of the local people is absolutely great. We've had tremendous support with the Eastern Capers.
Although only 18 of the original 59 finished, it really was a tremendous event. The final positions presently on your screen.
Soon after the early morning start, the second section started to produce the expected close battles. After setting fastest time in the sprint section, Carolyn and Pretorius were to have a trouble-free run, but were quickly under severe pressure from Pinoy and Purchase. They led before the refuel point, but then lost valuable time with a puncture. Punctures were also a problem for Richard Schilling and Fred Levesque, with Yates and Alberts running into a host of minor problems. Andre and Rodney Kopp were to have a clean run, but the Parkers were soon in trouble, losing valuable championship ground. Mechanical problems were also to put paid to Johan Otto's chances, but Botswana cattle farmer Karel van Vieren had a great run to finish 6th overall and 1st in his class. Linton Draper was up with the leading bunch, but had bad luck 40 kilometers from the finish with a broken prop shaft. The Toyota pair Bill Angus and Derek Wetherall maintained a 100% finish record this season, with Milan and Leek going like the clappers after breaking down on day 1. There were also problems for Spencer and for Mark, who trailed in 4 hours after the leader with a broken steering. For Rashid Noble and Joe Arby, the going was tough at times, with Arnold Pistorius and the Piet Putter-Willie de Plooy combination finding it just that little bit easier. Alfred van Vieren and Beert Pelser were losing ground in Class 5, but soldiered on to finish 2nd behind the Van Vieren-Versveld combination. Another steady drive saw Richard Carolyn, brother of Bucks, headed for 2nd place in the Raceco single-seater behind Pistorius in Class 9. For the Carolyn family, 1st and 12th places overall provided for a good weekend's work. Hopkinson and Spencer had Class 2 all to themselves and were the only finishers in this category. They were also 15th overall. Driving on his own, Wolf Peter Fumfe ran into navigation and mechanical problems. These combined to drop him to 2nd place in Class 10. Neville Williams and Paul Hayes were another crew to sometimes fall foul of the tough route, and a navigator's lot is not always to sit back and take it easy. The Fincham-Kemp combination grabbed 10th spot and 2nd in Class 3. With Trevor Els and Div de Villiers hot on their heels in 11th place. Mechanical problems held up Frick Mulder and Jacob van der Linde, but Johan Pieterse and Toff Hill went well to clinch Class 10. Out in front, Carolyn and Pretorius had taken control. Although Milan and Leek set the fastest race time, starting from the back of the field and an additional 30-minute penalty was just too much of a handicap. Carolyn held a 20-minute lead over Yates and Alberts. Meanwhile, Pinoy and Purchase, after their puncture problems, were also chasing and trying to close a 2-minute gap they had to make up on Yates and Alberts. Carolyn would willingly swap his 4 wins this season for victory in the Roof of Africa, but the Mabatu Sun 500 win gives Carolyn and Pretorius a handy lead in the championship for special vehicles. First in Class 6 and 4th overall were popular Andre and Rodney Koch in the Toyota Land Cruiser. A flying Karel van Vieren and Koffie Versveld took Class 5 in the Toyota Hilux and were 6th overall. The Angus and Wetherall duo dominated Class 3 in the Toyota Hilux. They are now only a single point behind Milan and Leek in the Commercial Vehicle Championship, with just 2 events left to run. Arnold Pistorius was a convincing winner in Class 9, with Hopkinson and Spencer clinching the Production Vehicle Championship. A tremendous battle was expected in the bike classes, with the top riders in South Africa fighting it out. Springbok Davies cannot be beaten in the over 250 championship, and most of the attention was focused on the battle between Willie Island on the new Greenup KTM and Alfie Cox in the Kawasaki in the 250 class. Other big guns in the field included Hilton Beattie on another Greenup KTM, Honda rider Mike Harrower, and Yamaha star Gavin Nimmo, who made a flying start. For Ireland, only 3 points behind Cox in the 250 championship at the start, the Mabatu Sun 500 was a major disappointment. Ireland was going like a train when the new KTM seized, and the Greenup rider was confined to an afternoon of lazing next to the pool at the Mabatu Sun Hotel. Out in front, Davies and Cox were turning the event into a two-horse race. The pair quickly pulled away from the rest, with Beattie and Nimmo, who had a couple of anxious moments, desperately trying to keep in touch. While the stars fought it out, Namibian schoolboy Ivo Trompe produced the performance of the race. In his first national championship event, Trompe came in third overall, ahead of established riders like Patrick Andrews, Nimmo and Beattie. Dirk Stradom is also having a good run along with Ralph Pitchford, who picked up another 200 class win to increase his lead in the championship. A good performance saw John Hodgson pick up second place in the 200 class behind Pitchford. Out in front, Cox and Davies were locked in a duel that was to last throughout the race. And behind them, it was every man for himself. Andy Smythe was to grab 7th overall, with Grant Hayward third in the 200 class after a close battle with Pitchford and Hodgson. Peter Trollop and Heinz Schwartz also had a good dice throughout the race. A broken exhaust meant a slow and uncomfortable ride to the finish for veteran Joe van Altena. Leading his class when the exhaust went, Van Altena eventually finished 37th, but retained third place in the 200 championship. Gary Lipchik finished well down in the 200 class, but like Billy could see on the Harry Suzuki quad racer, was enjoying himself hugely. The battle between Cox and Davies was finally settled at a refuel point. Davies lost time fitting a new brake caliper, and this gave Cox just the edge he needed. "I was tired of falling off," said Davies, who made a do-or-die charge to try and catch his friend and rival. Cox came home first, but at the finish, only 16 seconds separated the pair in a superb finale. And bubbly and a handshake said it all.
Die eindstryd van die
The first round of the 1990 South African Off-Road Championship last weekend. Klaus Degner and Hilton Beattie led the four-wheelers away in their Ducklands Canal. They were followed by the always competitive Derek Pinoy and Jack Purchase in their Class 8 Honeyloop Spider. Third away and favourites to take the overall victory were Philip Malone and Springbok navigator Richard Leek in the Toyota dealer team Hilux. Last year's winners, Api Reyneke and Lucas Dreyer, were well in contention in their immaculate BP Nissan Safari, and they were soon to challenge the Toyota for the overall and Class 6 lead. Father and son crew, Glenn and Steve Parker, were the overnight leaders in Class 7, a position they were to hold almost to the finish. Further back, a tremendous dice developed between Niels Eriksson in his Space Ram Beetle, Class 9 leader Harry Roscoe in his Orco, and Mervyn Woods from PE in his venerable Sandmaster. Woods led a 10-team contingent of Eastern Cape competitors in the event, and they were soon to show their worth. Meanwhile, Philip Malone and Richard Leek used every bit of road holding and the 400 horsepower of their turbocharged Toyota Hilux to take the lead by the halfway mark at Setlagoli, which again proved a popular spectator point. Mervyn Woods was impressive in the ex-Des Tarberton-owned Sandmaster, and he reached the Setlagoli River crossing second overall and the leader in Class 9. He had class rival Jack Spencer, now with 2.4-litre VW power in his Sandmaster, close on his heels, followed by Harry Roscoe, also in Class 9 with his Orco. Next followed the hard-charging Parker father and son combination, still leading Class 7. Reyneke and Dreyer found some of the rough terrain difficult to traverse in their big Nissan. They were forced to wave a determined Bucks Carolyn and Kenny Skolthammer through in the Natal Earthworks Raceco. Also following closely were Niels Eriksen in his Beetle and Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermaak in their Class 8 Special. Hanging on grimly were Klaus Degener and Hilton Beattie in the Duckham's Chinath. Degener was suffering from food poisoning and 3 punctures did not help their cause. Derek Pinoy and Jack Purchase were also making up time and places after a slow roll in their Honeyloop Spider, which delayed them considerably. They reached the river crossing just ahead of Class 5 leaders Alfred van Vuren and Piet Pelser in their Toyota, the Roger Westmeyer Orco, and Class 2 leaders Wilfried Westlau and Dagmar Blankner in their VW Special. Close on their heels were Dion Joubert and Chris Shin in their Class 8 Centaur, and Richard Carolyn, brother of Bucks, in his lubrication equipment racecar. Jack Spencer, driving solo for the first time in a long while, went well over the notoriously steep and rocky step section. He was followed by Andre Krok and Dani van der Merwe in their Beatmaster Toyota, which was to finish second in Class 6, and the consistently driven Class 4 Isuzu of Dave and Greg Gurney. Ashley Thorne and Pepe Marte from Lesotho were well placed in their Chinath after a slow start and eventually finished second in Class 8 and third overall. Meanwhile, the Class 2 Beetle of Abdul Bariawa and Hanif Hussein was heading for a well-earned second in Class 2, followed by the Class 7 winning Beetle of Charlie Higgs and Corby van der Merwe, which showed great form over the rough route. With the Milan League Toyota not stopping at the refuel point, tension ran high as second-place Reinecker and Dreyer pulled in for a wheel change and some refreshments. They were shortly followed by determined Carolyn and Schultheimer, who needed a tyre change, and Mervyn Woods, whose enthusiastic Eastern Cape crew swarmed over his Sandmaster. Degener and Beattie limped in with yet another flat wheel. With a tyre bolted to the rim, they could ride on the deflated tyre but still lost time. They had to settle for 4th place in Class 8. While the crew set about the wheel change, and exhausted Degener looked on. And former motorcycle racer Hilton Beattie commented about navigating.
You bounce around in there so much to try and read that route schedule. I've got to have about 8 hours. I can hardly see out my hours now. Anyway.
Milan and Leek were in the home stretch now and sensed victory, followed by a still hard-charging Carolyn and Schultheimer in the racecar. Mervyn Woods completed a great performance by eventually finishing 4th overall and 1st in Class 9 in the Sandmaster. Reinecker and Dreyer retired with a broken transmission, while Richard Schilling and Fred Lebesque took 5th place overall in the Motor Tech Chinath, ahead of the Class 5 winning Toyota Hilux of Alfred van Vuren and Piet Pelser. Former off-road champions Westlau and Blankner scored a well-deserved victory in Class 2. With Piet Petter and Willie Deploy the winners in Class 3 in their Toyota. Henry Costain and Dries de Klerk drove their monster 7-litre V8 Cortina bakkie to a popular win in Class 4. While Johan and Ferdi Pieterse took the honours in Class 10 in their VW, and Jan van Beek and Frans Dekker in Class 1 in a Toyota Hilux. The South African Off-Road Championship places the emphasis on class rather than overall success, with champions declared in the special vehicle, commercial vehicle and production-based vehicle categories. Alfie Cox led off the motorcycle contingent on his Drivelines Kawasaki, followed by Jeremy Davies on his Greenup KTM, Errol Dalton on his Bird Paradise Kawasaki, and Patrick Andrew from Lesotho on his Winston Yamaha. Cox was in fine form, and he streaked into a commanding lead. Andrews found time to wave at the cameraman while holding down a good second place on the Winston Yamaha despite brake problems. The over 250cc class leader was Errol Dalton, displaying the talent that prompted Kawasaki to sign him as Jeremy Davies' replacement. Former motocross racer Gary Peterson, riding the Truck Africa KTM, was soon in his stride and hanging on to second place in the over 250cc class. Jeremy Davies initially went well on his green of KTM, but an electrical problem eventually forced him out of the event. Leader Alfie Cox ran out of juice within sight of the refuel and managed to borrow a cup of fuel from the Motortech pit crew and got going again. Another rider who received assistance was the stranded Davies, who got a lift from KTM teammate Peterson, who was in a handy second place behind Cox. Lesotho star Patrick Andrews stormed into the refuel mere seconds behind Peterson. While Davies explained his problems to KTM boss Butch Hirsch, the team feverishly refueled the KTM and the Yamaha, and Peterson leaving seconds before a determined Andrews, the scene was set for a fight to the finish. Brian Bontekonen won the 200cc class for the Bird Paradise Kawasaki team. Despite their rough route, top riders like Alfie Cox regularly exceeded speeds of 160 kilometers per hour, leaving precious little room for error. Following last year's tragedy when two bikers died at Barberspon, the organizers this year went to great lengths to ensure the safety of the two-wheelers. Extensive medical support along the route, backed up by the IGI Med Rescue helicopter, which was on standby throughout the event to transport injured competitors to hospital, proved invaluable. A jubilant Alfie Cox took the flag after a brilliant performance on the Drivelines Kawasaki. Kawasaki had good reason to celebrate at the end of the day with victory in the 200, 250 and over 250 classes. Desert race, the second round in this year's South African Off-Road Championship, was run through the Kalahari last weekend. As usual, the race started and finished in Vryburg, but there was a break from tradition with the usual Thursday pre-race qualifying session no longer part of the proceedings. Crews were seeded according to their championship positions and faced a frosty pre-dawn start on the Friday. Ahead of them lay one of the toughest challenges in South African motorsport. On the first day, the 491-kilometer route took crews from Vryburg to Heunungsvlei and then to Taylorspan in the middle of the Kalahari, where they would camp overnight. Last year's winners, Philip Milan and Richard Leek, were the early pace-setters in their turbocharged four-wheel drive Toyota Hilux and were chased by locals RP Reyneke and Lucas Dreyer in their BP Nissan Safari. A big battle between the two trucks was on the cards, but after 96 kilometers, Milan slowed and finally came to a stop with turbocharger problems. First, Reyneke swept past while Milan and Leek attended to their stricken vehicle, followed by Klaus Degener and Hilton Beattie in their Duckham Chanath, and the Durex Raceco of a hard-charging Robin Yates and Mike Pretorius.
Die turbo se seele toegegaan en die olie blaas nou reguit weer in die uitlaatsysteem. So dit sal net 'n paar kilometer hou en dan sal al die olie klaar wees en ons sal die masjien heeltemal beskadig, so ons kan nie aangaan.
Meanwhile, a tough battle was being fought for fourth position with Bucks Carolyn and Kenny Skolthammer in their Raceco, taking on former winners Andre Koch and Dani van der Merwe in their aggressively driven turbocharged Beefmaster Toyota Land Cruiser. Class 5 leaders Bill Angus and Derek Weatherall in their four-cylinder Toyota Hilux 4x4 were followed by veterans Richard Schilling and Fred Levesque in their Mototech Chanath, and the father and son team of Glenn and Steve Parker, who were leading Class 7 in their Orco. Up front, the battle for the overall lead came to a head after 120 kilometers when a farm gate got in the way of Reyneke and Dreyer's Nissan. The gate proved to be no match for the Nissan, but the incident gave a determined Klaus Degener and Hilton Beattie the opportunity to close the gap on the leaders. The superior acceleration of the lightweight Duckham Chenoweth allowed Degener to snatch the lead when Reinecker and Dreyer sportingly moved over to let him pass. Veteran Jack Spencer was enjoying himself in his Volkswagen-powered Duckham Sandmaster and led Class 9 for single-seater space frame cars, while a group of school children gave a rousing reception to local hero Piet Pitter and Tony Salvage in the Toyota Hilux Bucky. Cecil Fincham and Yanni Pretorius found the farm gates rather narrow for their wild V8 Cortina Bucky. Nevertheless, they persevered and were leading in Class 4 after the demise of Linton Draper and Alex Vowell's radical imported Nissan hardbody. Derek Pinoy and Jack Purchase were delayed in the early stages when some 100 metres of barbed wire wrapped itself round the suspension of their Honey Lube Spider. Having solved the problem, they were steadily working their way through the field. In the motorcycle category, Green of KTM rider Jeremy Davies led overall and in the 250 class. The superbly fit Davies saw no need to pace himself. His plan was to control the two-wheeler category from the front. He was followed by the over 250 class leader Errol Dalton, who rode his Bird Paradise Kawasaki in aggressive style from the start and was hoping to capitalize on any mistakes on the part of the Flying Davies. Third was Winston Yamaha racer Gavin Nimmo, who later in the day had a narrow escape when he fell and was hit from behind by a car. He was unhurt but had to retire at the overnight stop. One of the sensations of the race was the young Jason Andrika. He was holding down fourth place overall on his 200cc Bird Paradise Kawasaki, ahead of many riders on bigger and more powerful motorcycles. Second in the 200cc class was Brian Bontekoning, also on a Bird Paradise Kawasaki, featuring some rather unusual aerodynamic styling. He was riding on the limit in his effort to keep teammate Andrika in sight. Alfie Cox had various problems with his Drivelines Kawasaki. First a wheel bearing seized, then while he was making his way through the field, a thorn punctured a radiator hose, and the resultant water loss caused overheating problems, and he decided to call it a day. The designated service point was at Dinopeng, 218 kilometers into the route. Degener and Beattie still led in the Duckham's Chenoweth, having enjoyed a trouble-free run up to that point, and were spearheading a total domination of the event by space frame vehicles. This was a new trend for the Toyota 1000 Desert Race, which has in the past been dominated by trucks. In fact, the last time a space frame car won the event was in 1982, when Des Tarberton took the honours in his King Scorpion. After the refuel, Robin Yates and Mike Pretorius started to charge in the Durex Raceco, passing the Reinecker Dreyer Nissan to take second spot. The experienced Reinecker was content to follow in third place, knowing that the unforgiving Kalahari has a habit of upsetting racing teams' best-laid plans. Meanwhile, the consistent Robert Walk led Class 9 in his Samurai after the demise of early class leader Jack Spencer. In Class 5, the privately entered four-wheel drive Toyota Hilux of Karel van Vuren and Koffie Versveld led after a smooth and trouble-free run. Andre Buerter and Chris Roos were the front runners in Class 7 in their unusual Orco Bucky, which is powered by a mid-mounted 3-litre BMW engine, while another Orco, the twin-seater of Johan and Ferdi Pieterse, was holding down the lead in Class 10. Wilfried Weslau and Dagmar Blankner in the VW led in Class 2, but there was trouble in store for them in the notorious riverbed section. While Wolf-Peter Prumfai and Martin Spencer merely got their Volkswagen well and truly stuck in the sand, Weslau and Blankner rolled theirs with the Lesotho crew lucky to escape injury. Jeremy Davies and his Green of KTM still held a commanding lead in the motorcycle category, and the chance of him being challenged for the first day lead seemed remote. Errol Dalton was hanging on to second place overall, and the Winston Yamaha. With the impressive Jason Andrika, also known by the nickname Staffy, still leading the 200cc class on the Bird Paradise Kawasaki. Kunneke and Dreyer arrived at the Taylor's Pan overnight halt first in the Nissan. They took the lead just 4 kilometres from the finish when front-runners Yates and Pretorius ran out of fuel in the Durex Raceco. Second in were Richard Schilling and Fred Levesque in the Motortech Chernow. They were enjoying an uneventful run and did not have to get out of the car once on their way to the overnight stop. The furious Yates and Pretorius managed to borrow fuel from another competitor and they stormed to the finish to take third spot for the day. Bucks Carolyn and Kenny Schothammer followed in the Natal Earthworks Raceco with few problems to report and a firm resolve to move up the leaderboard the next day. Running out of fuel became a common problem. Another victim was Klaus Degener, who persuaded Derek Pinoy to tow his car for some of the way. Others ended up by trying to hitch a ride from the TV helicopter or waited patiently for help. Pinoy had to abandon his sportsmanlike efforts to get Degener home when his clutch overheated. Front bike runner Davies foresaw the fuel problems and carried extra petrol with him. After refueling near the end, he blasted past the stranded Degener to come in first in the two-wheeler category. Errol Dalton's Kawasaki ran out of petrol within sight of the finish. It looked as though he would lose second place, but once again, a fellow competitor came to his aid. Despite being knocked unconscious in a high-speed crash earlier in the day, Winston Yamaha rider Patrick Andrews came in third. Ever the showman, Andrews gave this exhibition for the TV cameras after 490 kilometres of racing through some of the most unforgiving terrain anywhere. Richard Carolyn also had fuel problems, but Brian Bontekoning had a clean run for second place in the 200cc bike class. With the competitors settling in for a night under the stars at Taylor's Pan in